Europeans have always smelled. Let's
So lovely. So I came across this video on my For You. I'm laughing because this stage I'm about to play is just so hilarious. It's something that I was like, oh, really? It's coming from a pan-colored man. He decided to reveal everything European. And to crown it all, these people left a stereotype that they brought about civilization, cleanliness, and thereabout. But they are actually the people that needed those things in which they claim that they brought at the cost of colonization. I'm just going to roll the clip. As well as some of other stitches I was able to put together. Please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. Please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. Alright, lovelies, let's dive into it. So lovelies, I came across this video on my For You and I thought to share when this Latino woman is all out to call upon Black people, Latino people, and the tension between these two communities. She goes as far as to talk about how unity is just the only way to go. She shared so many emotional stories of how, Black people and Latino people actually need to come together in one force to fight this, white supremacy or she said a whole lot. And I'm just going to roll the clip. As well as some of other stitches I was able to put together. Please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We're just here for educational and informative purposes. Alright, lovely, let's dive into it.
We now have a generation that believes everything we did by colonizing. Yes, it is true. They think everything about colonization was wrong. It wasn't. There were some terrible things, and there were some good things to come out of it. And that is about properly acknowledging your past.
Education.
Yes, completely.
Sanitation.
Transportation.
Yeah. There was so much that we brought to communities.
But you see, you're typical of what we're talking about.
No, I'm saying that colonization, the empire was wrong. It was wrong, full stop. That's, the things that Britain might have done.
But that's very much through your modern sensibilities,
Yes.
you might say that, because we wouldn't now routinely go into other countries.
It was a profoundly racist set of basically invasions of other people, where we subjugated people to our rule and sort of made them work for us. It was
made their countries work.
But imagine yourself in the shoes of a 13-year-old boy hearing you say that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What do they then? How do they then carry that through life?
Well,
in terms of who I am as a Brit.
But it's not about.
We had racist ancestors.
Say it,
but Bev.
But I'm saying that we hear much more of that than we do about the benefits of that period of time.
Well, because I don't think there were benefits. I think that we have to be completely.
Of course there were.
I don't think there were.
There were benefits to us.
A lot of those countries did not, Jonathan, those countries,
it absolutely does.
Those countries did not have money. They did not have the creativity. They did not have people in positions of power to do this. No, they didn't.
Countries. They just didn't live like Britain did. It doesn't make it worse. It just makes it different.
So it's okay to live without education, and it's okay to live without a transportation system, is it?
They did have education. It just wasn't our education system. They had language. It wasn't our language.
This cultural
medicine we brought to
precisely what we have.
Yes.
I don't know. Look, I don't know why we're even.
Europeans have always smelled. Let's stop using polite words like odor. This wasn't a whiff. This wasn't a bad day. This was centuries of stewing stench trapped in wool, leather, linen, and flesh. It was historical, systemic, biological stench policy. A full body, all angles, top to bottom, olfactory assault. Their breath reeked of rotting meat and mouth fungus because they didn't brush, just chewed cloves or rubbed ashes on their blackened teeth. Their feet marinated in damp boots with no socks, no airing, no soap, just foot rot, raw heel flesh, and toe jam so thick it had texture. Their groins enclosed in 4 layers of wool and linen, piss-stained drawers, no bathing, and a cultural fear of touching their own genitals. Yeast, sweat, discharge, and fear, all mingling in a mildewed, sexually confused stew. Their beds were soaked in old urine. Their wigs were laced with lice, dandruff, and dried scalp pus. Their royal garments passed down, still stained, with sour crotch melt and unwashed armpit grease. They didn't change clothes. They Febrezed with flower water and prayed. They didn't wash hands. They wiped on curtains. They didn't wash hair. They powdered over rot and wore it like status, and you could smell it coming. Diplomatic records say indigenous envoys smelled European ships before they saw the sails. Maori leaders recoiled from dead water scent of settler bodies. In the Congo, elders noted that the missionaries brought this smell of old meat. In India, servants had perfumed cloths to their faces. Everywhere they landed, they brought an odor that could peel bark off of trees. But here's the real kicker. They called other people unclean. They walked into bathed, perfumed, scented, flower-oiled civilizations and gagged the air, and then tried to rewrite the story like they were the teachers of cleanliness. The Yoruba had soap made from shea and ash centuries before Europe had running water. The Aztecs used herbs, clays, and sweat lodges. The Khmer bathed twice a day in flower-infused river water. But the Europeans came with crotch fumes, beard rot, and medieval fear, and still claimed moral high ground. Let's be clear, Europe didn't just smell. It festered. The stench bubbled. It wasn't on the surface. It was in the walls of the castles, the folds of linen, the seams of history. They colonized the world, while leaking mildew from every pore. Every handshake was damp. Every breath was sour. Every empire was built on body odor. And when the stench got too thick to bear, what did they do? They didn't wash. They perfumed. They didn't clean the rot. They masked it. Europeans have always smelled. They exported genocide, greed, disease, and they did it reeking. Gope. Europeans have always had fungus. We need to stop being polite about this, because the truth isn't just that Europeans were dirty. They were festering, flaking, dripping, peeling in patches. They weren't building empires. They were fermenting in their own boots. You want the truth? Europe was a walking yeast infection. Toenails blackened and curling like horn. Socks fused to skin. Moisture trapped in woolen folds. Cracks between toes stuffed with yellow-white decay. Scalps flaking like ash in winter. Taint rot. Ball mildew. Under boob moss. And they normalized it. They designed around it. Tight corsets with no ventilation. Trousers soaked in sweat with no washing. For months. Priests with mold in their robes. Kings with fungus under their crowns. Even their holy relics were moldy. Literally. We have museum records of fungi growing on preserved saint corpses. Meanwhile, in Mali, healers used shea, crushed kola nut, and antifungal earths from the Niger floodplain. In the Philippines, vinegar baths with guava leaf kept folds dry and infection-free. In indigenous Amazonian communities, they brewed powerful antifungal tonics from bark that science still can't replicate. But the Europeans showed up oozing, flaking, and itching, and called them unclean. Let's talk about their food. Ergot fungus in their bread led to seizures, hallucinations, and vomiting black foam. Whole villages convulsing and clawing at their skin. And what did they blame? Witches, not the spoiled grain, not the damp cellar. Women. Let's talk about the colonies. They stepped off mold-infested ships into tropical climates and immediately began to rot. Jock itch spreading in military camps, mouth thrush in missionary schools, infected armpits in plantation barracks, and they exported every spore. Fungus in their maps, fungus in their beds, fungus in their theology, a rotting body and a rotting soul. Europeans didn't just have fungus, they built a civilization that required it. Without rot, they'd have nothing left to cling to. Without mold, they'd have no bread. Without flake, no powder. Without sweat, no stink. Europe has always been leaking, and it still is. Cope. Europeans have always stolen Africans. They didn't just steal bodies. They stole Africans, and they did it repeatedly, systemically, and with precision. Not like thieves, but like harvesters, like predators, like parasites that built every modern European institution off the extraction of African life. Not just labor, not just land, but identity, cosmology, memory, time. Europe's theft of Africans didn't begin with the transatlantic slave trade. It began before it. In 1441, Portuguese sailors abducted Africans from the coast of modern-day Mauritania, not through war, not through conquest, through trickery. They baited, kidnapped, and enslaved innocent people, justifying it with papal documents that declared black skin a mark of servitude. These weren't isolated incidents. They were state-funded dry runs, pilot programs for mass theft. Before the Americas, Portugal tested mass African enslavement on African soil, setting the template for Brazil, the Caribbean, and the American South. Every plantation in the Western Hemisphere is a clone of this theft experiment. And who was stolen? Not criminals, not prisoners. Farmers, artisans, priests, mothers, griots, engineers. Stolen and renamed property. 12.5 million Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic. But that's only those who survived. Another 20 to 25 million were killed in the process. Raids, forced marches, coastal stockades, and ship rebellions. So no, the slave trade didn't just steal labor, it stole generations. It broke ancestral lineages that had existed thousands of years. Entire ethnic groups were depopulated, fractured, disappeared. Europeans stole African people, but also African knowledge. West African metallurgy, irrigation, crop rotation, architecture were looted and repackaged with European names. African herbal systems became European apothecaries. African architecture became classical revival. African resistance strategies became case studies in colonial military academies. They didn't just steal Africans. They stole what Africans knew and then buried the source. After physically stealing Africans, Europe built science to steal them symbolically. Craniology, phrenology, blood quantum, all designed to dehumanize blackness so the theft never had to be morally reconciled and repurposed in my video about Jordan Peterson. The Enlightenment wasn't a light, it was a cover story. Locke and Hume wrote essays about liberty while investing in slave ships. Kant wrote moral philosophy while describing Africans as subhuman. Theft wrapped in theory. 1884, Berlin, not a single African in the room. 14 European nations sat down to legally divide the entire African continent. Its resources, rivers, mountains, people. They drew borders with zero understanding of ethnic, linguistic, or political realities. Why? Because this was never about governance. It was about extraction. The same Africans they had stolen and dispersed, they now returned to colonize under a different theft model. Forced labor, cultural erasure, and economic plunder, dressed up as civilization. Decolonization didn't end the theft, it rebranded it. France still collects colonial tax from 14 African nations, amounting to over 500 billion since 1960. The IMF and World Bank control African economic policy. European NGOs dictate agricultural strategies, while Europe dumps subsidized crops to destroy local economies. The continent remains structurally looted. They stole Africans, and they keep stealing from them by stealing their future. Look at the Caribbean. Look at Black America. Africans still being stolen through incarceration, through sterilization, through miseducation, through cultural erasure. The prison industrial complex is theft. Medical racism is theft. The adoption pipeline, foster system, school to prison pipeline, every one a mechanism for stealing Africans from themselves. The theft never stopped. It evolved. Europe never stopped stealing Africans. They just stopped using chains. And the worst part? They made the whole world forget it was theft. They turned mass abduction into a curriculum, turned genocide into exploration, turned entire stolen nations into case studies on underdevelopment. But it wasn't underdevelopment. It was undone development, ripped out, rooted up, systematically stolen, and they're still running empires on it to this day. Cope. Europeans have always had lice. Let's not beat around the bush. Or rather, let's talk about the fact that Europeans never stopped scratching theirs. Because while they were busy calling other civilizations dirty or primitive, they were literally crawling with parasites. Not figuratively, literally crawling. Head lice, body lice, pubic lice, all three. And not as a rare occurrence, but as a chronic European condition. Medieval monarchs itched under fur-lined crowns. Victorian children were sent to school with combs soaked in vinegar, not because it worked, but because they hoped it would. Aristocrats powdered their wigs to cover the eggs. Louis XIV's Versailles Palace didn't even have functioning toilets, but it did have lice. Meanwhile, let's be clear, in Yoruba society, children were groomed daily with carved ivory or wooden combs, oiled with shea butter, and kept parasite-free. In the Andean highlands, Aymara women used quinoa ash and mountain herbs to kill lice without ever stripping the hair of its natural shine. In India, Ayurvedic texts described how to maintain the scalp and the spirit. No synthetic soap, no lice, no shame. Even among the nomadic Tuareg of the Sahara, whose environment was dry and harsh, lice were not normalized because hygiene was ritualized. But Europe made it fashion. They invented powdered wigs, not just for style, but to hide infestations. They wore layers of wool in warm seasons, slept in damp communal beds, and avoided bathing for religious reasons. Some didn't even believe water should touch the body. And when lice spread typhus and trench fever in their wars and colonies, they blamed the weather, not their own filth. They colonized entire continents while scratching their scalps raw, dragging lice to lands that had no lice problems before contact. They brought parasites to boarding schools, to plantations, to prison camps, to indigenous villages, and called it civilization. They exported infestation. They globalized itch. And when non-Europeans described their own ancestral hygiene methods, Europeans laughed, called it folk medicine, witchcraft, unscientific. But somehow vinegar and powdered wigs were enough to make them enlightened. Europeans have always had lice, but worse, they've always had the audacity to act like they didn't. Cope.
Like, seriously, Lovelace, when I saw this man, pan-colored man has actually been going viral on the social platform. He posts videos, and sometimes some of these, people that does not like what he put out there try to like stop him, but he continued anyways. And I am stitching this video because there is this particular video that went viral sometimes 3 weeks back on the social platform where I think she's British woman. She was all over her podcast to talk about how colonizing African people, brought about civilization and cleanliness. She even goes as far as to talk about, if not for colonization, that African people might still be worshipping the sea, the river, or whatsoever. That might not be something like education, or people might not even get educated. And these guys actually thought that we are not well informed right now. Like, the social media has actually opened a lot. Like, it has opened our eyes. And the way at which this propaganded Western media try to change things, trying to make people think that, oh, they are the God of gods. They are the ones, the omnipotent and omniscience, the beginning and the end. That was when people start to realize that these guys don't even shower. Like, the first time I heard that, some of these people, not all, they don't even shower, take a proper bath with maybe washcloth or the African sponge. African sponge is my favorite. I was like, wait a minute. How? I was shocked. Another thing is that some don't even wash legs. They believe that the water which you pour runs through your leg. And how can these people now be the people that brings cleanliness, education? And I also get to realize that even before colonization, African has always had their own type of education. They have always had their own type of civilization. They have always had their own type of the way at which they worship God. They have always had. Because even as the course of this, my research, trying to know about Black people, Black history, slavery and enslavement, I get to understand that Black people have always been worshiping God. They have their own way of serving God before the introduction of Christianity. So what are they saying? And now they are known for their fingers. I didn't say that. It is actually coming from one of their kind. And like someone that looks like me as a Black woman, and every other thing, I just want to learn. I want to know. So then when I came across this, I tried to compare this with what the British woman was talking about them being, or was talking about them bringing cleanliness. If you are not able to take a proper hygiene seriously, how come you bring about cleanliness? If you don't wash your maybe your pots before cooking, or wash your vegetables, your chicken, all those things, how come you bring about clean? How come you bring cleanliness? Huh? It's so strange. The story is not adding up. Someone who brought about cleanliness, education, civilization cannot even properly take care of a personal hygiene. So all of those lies, propaganda, and what have you is getting exposed each and every passing day. And I like the fact that it's actually coming from, it's not more from people that looks like me. Because maybe when we say things like this, they're like, oh my God, you guys, no, but it is what it is. I don't know about this. I mean, if you have heard about it, if you have heard about it before, you could just leave it in the comment section of I think. Anyway, lovelies, like from the beginning of this speech, I was just laughing because this is just so unbelievable. Let me your thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We're just here for educational and informative purposes. So please share, subscribe, and I will see you lovely when I upload the next one.